Hey everyone, welcome to the third week of Brave. My name's Josie and I'm a Ransom Teens pastor. Thank you so much for joining us today. The past month has been a little bit insane and all of us are just trying to figure out a new normal. But within that, I'm so thankful you're here with us. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're so glad you're here. If you haven't heard yet, this Brave series came together with a whole bunch of different youth groups all spread out throughout Wyoming and South Dakota. So I know tonight we have Trailhead Youth, New Life Youth, Thrive Youth, Countryside Youth, LifeSpring Youth, Grace Point Student Ministries, Linwood Student Ministries, and of course, Ransom Teens. And if there's any other youth groups out there joining us in this series, welcome. And also, any person not tied to a youth group, we're so excited you've joined in. I hope all of you realize how amazing this is. The body of Christ coming together at a time of crisis is so wonderful to see, and I'm so blessed to be a part of it. Before we get started, if you haven't yet, please share this link with anyone you can think of. Also, if you're watching alone, I encourage you to watch with someone, whether that's a family member, a friend, or a small group. Watch this video with someone you can talk to. Last week, we were challenged by Pastor Sean asking if we are brave enough to testify. If you missed that message, you can find it under your youth group's YouTube page or under the Ransom Teens YouTube page. I don't know about you guys, but with all this time sitting at home in the past few weeks, I've had a lot of time to reminisce and really just think about my past and my childhood. A giant part of my childhood was being at church and serving at church. Some of the best memories I have come from kids' church or youth group, even lifelong friends I've met from different ministries and different opportunities to serve at church. I was the kind of student who would literally serve in any single area the church would allow. I loved it, it felt like a second home. However, eventually I started to realize that I like serving in some areas a lot more than others, and I was a lot more talented in some areas than others. But there's one serving experience that just sticks with me to this day. When I was 14 years old, I got asked to be in the church's Christmas production, which of course was an amazing opportunity. I wasn't gonna pass it up. But growing up, I grew up in a really small church, so there were only so many people who were able to serve and help with this Christmas production. During our first day of practice, when everyone's getting their roles and finding out what's going on, I find out the production is a play, which is fine. Not much of an actor myself, but I'm there, I'm good for it. Then, a little bit later, I find out I'm playing a character whose name is Brandon. And I thought, well, it's a weird name for a girl, but I kind of like it, that's cool. And then I find out that Brandon is actually a 19-year-old male. And I was a small 14-year-old female. So I had two options at this point. I could have laughed, said, no, this is ridiculous and impossible, or accept the challenge. Regretfully, I accepted that challenge. And holy cow, I was so bad. It was so awful. But I am beyond blessed that social media wasn't as popular then as it is now, because my life would have been over. I would have had to move to North Dakota, change my name. It would have been awful. And even though my performance was incredibly cringy, and I had fake beard stained on my face for a few days afterwards, I look back at that memory and there's joy. I was willing and able to serve, and I did. I want you guys to take a few minutes and reflect on what serving has looked like in your own life so far. So serving. I'm sure you may have just discovered there are so many different ways you can serve. But what does serving look like when your reality has been flipped upside down? For instance, when a pandemic hits and we're stuck inside, or when serving is harder than you thought it would be. Why should you serve when your own life's going terrible? Maybe you lost someone close to you, or maybe you're struggling with fear and anxiety. Why should you serve? In the Bible, there's a story of someone named Esther. If you have a Bible, feel free to turn to Esther chapter 4. If not, you can follow along on the screen. While you're turning there, let me tell you a bit of the background of our story. Esther was a normal Jewish girl. She became an orphan at a young age, and she ended up being raised by her uncle Mordecai. When Esther was a young woman, she ended up becoming the queen, which is crazy in itself. Esther wasn't in line to be queen. In fact, the king had no idea who she was until he just saw her and decided he wanted Esther to be his queen. During Esther's time as queen, a decree was sent out declaring that on a certain day in the upcoming year, all throughout the kingdom, all the Jews would be destroyed. Esther was a Jew. Her friends and her family were Jews. And they were facing a future that looked incredibly dark with a lot of unknowns. Can you imagine this? One day, everything's normal, and the next, the leader of your country says that you, your family, your friends, can legally be attacked and killed, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're going to pick up the story in chapter 4, verse 13. Mordecai has requested Esther to help save the Jewish people, but she is slightly hesitant because if she goes before the king, she could die. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther: "Do not think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows, perhaps if you were made queen for just a time as this." Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go and gather together all of the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night and day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die." So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. Esther was placed in a position that she didn't ask for. Esther didn't ask to be queen. And during this time, she had an option to stay in the palace. No one in the palace knew she was a Jew. She could have stayed in the palace, not said a word, and lived out her life as queen. But thankfully, that's not what Esther does. She realizes that she was placed in a position where only she could serve the Jewish people at this time. God uniquely positioned Esther so she could uniquely serve his kingdom. We're going to pause the video in a few seconds, and I want you to answer the question: where has God uniquely positioned you to serve? During this season, how might God have you in the perfect position to serve, even if it's difficult? As the story continues, Esther goes before the king and eventually builds up the courage to ask him to spare the Jewish people, which he does. All of their lives were saved. Take a minute and imagine being in Esther's position. Esther was around 14 years old when she became queen. You can only imagine the anxiety and the fear that she must have felt. Think back to when I was 14 years old. I was in a really strange Christmas production pretending to be a 19-year-old man. When Esther was 14, she was the queen. I can't imagine what that must have been like. Similarly to the story of Esther, right now as a nation, and really as the world, we're in a state of unknown that none of us asked to be in. I certainly didn't ask for social distancing and quarantine, and I'm sure none of you did either. We're living in a world that is crippled with anxiety and fear, and we're facing a future that's filled with unknowns and questions. Within all of this chaos and craziness, within our daily routines and lives needing to be completely changed, we can still serve. Yes, we're confined to our homes. School is basically all online now, and the family that you love so dearly is probably getting a little bit annoying. But you can still serve. To take that one step further, not only can we still serve, we should still serve, but it's gonna look a little different. You see, God has uniquely positioned you with gifts and talents that can still be used during social distancing and online school. Romans chapter 15, verses 1 and 2 say, "Those of us who are strong and able in the faith need to step in and lend a hand to those who falter, and not just do what is most convenient for us. Strength is for service, not status." Each one of us needs to look after the good of the people around us, asking ourselves, how can I help? So for all of you watching right now, how can you help? How can you serve those around you? Maybe that means helping a sibling with homework, cleaning up the kitchen for mom and dad, or running to the store for the neighbor who can't right now. However, this question of serving goes deeper than how. We need to answer why. Why should we serve? In the past few weeks, our everyday realities have drastically changed. Senior years have been lost, sports seasons have been canceled, and futures just seem to be on pause. We're gonna pause the video one last time to reflect on why we should serve. Why should we serve when our own lives don't seem fair? Why serve when your senior year has been ruined or a season has been canceled? Take a few minutes to answer this question. I really hope you just had a good discussion about why. Especially in a time like this, we as Christians are called to serve. The word Christian literally means little Christ. We're called to be mini Christs. And if you look at the life of Jesus, all he did was serve. In fact, Matthew chapter 20, verse 28 says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus served even when it was really hard. And as Christians, our lives should reflect the life of Jesus Christ. We are called to be servants. We are called to serve even when life is extremely hard and simply unfair. And every single one of us has been uniquely positioned with gifts and talents from the Heavenly Father to serve those around us. The last question I want you to think about and discuss is, are you brave enough to serve? Are you brave enough to serve even when it's difficult? Even when it's unfair? And please don't just answer yes, no, or maybe. Think about action steps or examples. How can you serve during this time? How can you use your unique position and gifts to serve those around you? You guys are so amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to see you next week.